Hey guys, before I end the show, I just wanted to kind of come back from the future past to tell you that the after show for this episode that's available to our supporters on Subscribestar, Bitbacker, and Patreon is like its own entire show unto itself. It's like 20 or 30 minutes long, and we talk about peaceful parenting, non-peaceful parenting, and the effects that that has on your relationship with your kids, how NVC, nonviolent communication, affects or works into or benefits peaceful parenting. We talk about the trivium. It's really cool. So if you're not a supporter, you might consider becoming one because you get access to a bunch of special content that not everybody does, including the after show of this one where we continue the discussion. Thanks for watching. Greetings, violent communicators. I am Patrick Smith. Welcome back to Disenthrall. Today we have an interesting show for you with not one, but two special guests that are here to speak on the topic of NVC, non-violent communication. First up with us, we have Darrell Becker, who's been using NVC and critical thinking skills for about 10 years. His business is contentsafe.co, where he helps content producers get published on lots of platforms. Welcome to the show, Darrell.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We also have with us Scott Swain, who I'm excited to have on the show. He has been an NVC trainer for 13 years and also runs the website clearsay.net, which specializes in meditation, voluntarism, peaceful parenting, and emotional intelligence tools. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I want to begin with, first of all, Scott, I wanted to say thanks for joining us today. I brag constantly to everyone everywhere about the meetup group we have here in Dallas, Voluntarists of Dallas. And I always talk about this one exposure that I had when I first, had the idea for creating the Voluntarist meetup here in Dallas was when I visited Austin in the process of making a video for this channel. And I was like, oh, there's this meetup group on meetup.com called Voluntarists of Austin. I think I'm going to stop by and see what it's like. Because I had never, I don't think, met another voluntarist in real life that I didn't create. Like, I didn't change someone's mind into voluntarism. I showed up and it was at your house. And I'm telling you, I always tell people this. We spent 4 hours surrounded by like-minded individuals, and it was life-changing. It was finding my tribe. And so I set out to recreate that here in Dallas. And so you were part of my initial inspiration to create Voluntarists of Dallas, which has gotten pretty huge and it's been amazing. So thank you for that, Scott. I wanted to shout out.
Wow. Yeah, that feels really good to hear. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I would like to start out with defining nonviolent communication and then also have one of you speak on how it can be useful or helpful in life. Who would like to take part one of that? What is NVC?
Can take that one, Scott.
Okay. What it means to me is a way of listening and speaking with ourselves and others, where our primary goal is to liberate, nurture communication, and increase responsibility and power for everyone participating. So,
can you give me a more practical answer? Like, what is it? How does it change what I do when I'm interacting with somebody?
Can I do that one?
Yeah. Coming over to you.
Thank you. Practically speaking, it's an actual practical methodology devised by Marshall Rosenberg it's like pushing 50 years or something like that. Approximately, maybe actually less than that. We're more like 30 some years at this point. So there's been a little bit of evolution over that time. So we're talking a methodology, and for those who use it just purely for speaking, they use it that way. Those who take it a bit deeper, like I'm going to imagine myself and Scott do, it's an internal methodology of changing ways of thinking and speaking, and that tends to produce more harmony and less conflict. And it was called nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg, who basically discovered and invented it.
So nonviolent communication. The first question that popped into my head back when I didn't know what this was no communication is violent unless it's inherently like a threat. So, and I'll just pitch this question to both of you. Whoever wants to answer is welcome to. And that's probably going to be how most of this goes, because I have not one but two experts on this, which is awesome. Thank you guys both for your time. What's violent about communication? Scott, I better name names.
Yeah, I don't enjoy that title. I don't believe that title represents very well, because I'm with you. I think I don't think communication. I think it's very useful for us to distinguish between physical violence and verbal violence. And I don't like the to me, there's a lack of clarity there in calling it nonviolent communication. And even it's in the first few pages of the books, there's a mention that people will often call it compassionate communication or something else. I'm writing a book right now, Practical Empathy, where I talk about that in a little bit more depth, why I don't subscribe to that term nonviolent communication.
Do you have any objections to that, Darrell?
No, I agree. It was just poor branding, which is really common for things across the ages, basically. There's nothing really violent about communication. There is only invasion of attention span. And in this day and age, that means like someone actually taking their message right in your face in your home, and you can't make them go away. Or when you get pulled over and it's right there in your face and you can't go away. Things like that, you know. So the communication wasn't the violent part. The violent part was the invasion of actual ownership and tangible space, like boundaries, ownership, and property. So it's just bad branding. I like to use voluntary communication. I like that term. And certainly focusing on the actual tools of the method, I find is way more important. I'm really looking forward to seeing and actually hearing what could have been the problems, like, to start this discussion. You know what I mean, Patrick?
Yeah, sure. So before we actually get into the subject, which was an objection I had to a way someone described the methodology of NVC, I would just like to help the audience get to know both of you a little bit better. So Scott, if you could tell us we'll start with Scott. If you could tell us where are you on the political spectrum? What do you label yourself as, and how, maybe briefly, how you got there?
Okay. So real quick, how I got there, reading Ayn Rand.
Well, where are you?
And right where I'm at right now is voluntarist.
Okay.
I mean, there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's some sub pieces of voluntarism that nobody agrees on, but the primary stuff that, hey, respect for private property, or respect for property. I don't want to get into the details there. And, freedom, and the idea that we can do away completely with government, that we can replace it peacefully. I'm definitely for peaceful, gradual revolution. And I don't know. I think that probably sums it up. If you have questions, I'm willing to go into whatever. Yeah.
Sure. What was your primary influence that got you there?
So I was already libertarian for quite a few years, minarchist libertarian, and Ron Paul, plus a bunch of really smart guys on Google Plus that I was debating with, kind of pushed me over the edge. Okay.
Very good. Awesome. Okay. Basically same question.
One other thing.
Yeah.
One other thing that is important, studying quite a bit of Austrian economics.
Okay.
So reading, Hayek and Rothbard and Mises and guys like that definitely went a long way toward pushing me over the edge.
That is definitely a very common response to that question, an economics nerd, and that is an awesome thing to be. Darrell, basically same question. What would you label or not? Identify yourself on the spectrum, let's say, and maybe tell us how you arrived there.
Right on. I would say that I came upon the ideas of liberty and the respect of boundaries, ownership, and property by each individual, the actual private respect. I came upon that as an idea, and I saw no problems with voluntarism. And so I called myself a voluntarist for a while, as well as anarcho-capitalist, because again, you look them up on Wikipedia, same thing. It's like I find no problem in these philosophies. I just decided eventually I would rather just dispense with confusing labels in general and really focus on myself, that was, on calling myself an individual if I'm going to use a label. And I still highly, big, huge respect for voluntarism as a philosophy on the non-aggression principle, which I utilize. I am a big proponent of critical thinking as a balance of the mind to the balance of the heart method of nonviolent communication methodology. So again, bad branding, but you understand, like I'm a proponent of methods. I'm a proponent of people understanding where they own things and where they don't, and therefore minding their own business. I'm very, very pro free choice, pro-choice of everything, as long as you own it. It's basically like that. And yeah, that would be where I'm coming from.
And how did you get there? What was your maybe primary influencer, or where did you start and how did you get there?
Awesome question. I started by listening to certain podcasts like the Corbett Report when I landed here on the big island of Hawaii. Eventually also to the School Sucks podcast, schoolsucksproject.com, which is pretty great resource out there. And then eventually the Peace Revolution podcast with Richard Grove, which really, really jump-started my studies into critical thinking and, really helped with the balance as I was learning nonviolent communication through CompleteLiberty.com, which might still be an archive, but that was an awesome podcast. That's how I met folks like Scott, actually.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that description. Okay, guys. So, I wanted to talk to experts, so I put out like a call for contenders for a debate, which in retrospect was a really dumb thing to do when asking for people knowledgeable in NVC to come on the show. Because even if I wanted this to be a debate, it would probably be the politest, most calm thing ever. So it's not a debate. This is just going to be a discussion. And I am going to be on the student end of this discussion. My initial exposures to NVC have been negative, and I want to give you my impressions, and then I want to sit here as a student and let you guys teach me where I'm wrong, what it should be, what it actually is, and then if my thesis that NVC cannot be the language of voluntarism is still valid, then maybe we can discuss that, right? Does that sound cool with you guys?
Yep.
Okay,
totally.
awesome. Awesome. All right. So my initial exposure was in a debate scenario. We were discussing, I don't even remember what the topic was, but we were discussing how the non-aggression principle applied to something contentious. And this was with people that weren't maybe they were minarchists or something like that, but they were practitioners of NVC coming from their perspective. And they were trying to have this contentious discussion about the ethics of, some activity. It could have been abortion. It could have been, police, anything. The subject didn't matter. But the point was the conversation I had with them was very frustrating because they wouldn't take a moral stand. Like they refused to make a moral judgment because the impression that they gave me, and they even said this, is like NVC sort of avoids or doesn't include or is incapable of, I'll let you correct me if I'm wrong, guys, of making judgments, of making moral judgments of people, at people, let's say. And so their responses always came off as like passive aggressive. Like they were trying to tell me things without telling me, without just looking me in the eye and telling me. They would talk about like when that entered my brain, I had this reaction. I'm like, oh, so you just mean you felt upset? Why didn't you just say I'm upset now? It's like it seems inefficient. It seems weird, and to me, my initial impressions. Again, I'm stating my position so that you can correct me. Because I'm ready to be wrong on this. It seems like something that would be really useful with tiny conflicts or small issues with strangers, where you want to kind of not offend them or piss them off or bring up emotions or anything like that. But also, it's not really a big deal. Maybe it's a smaller thing. It's not really a big ethical conflict where there's an evil person or something like that. So let me stop there with that, and maybe whoever speaks first, goes first. How about that?
I have an idea or a couple. Would you rather right now, we take apart, we get a little bit more detailed on what your experience was there. Like you know, we play roles a little bit, and or would you rather right now you throw it at us like you know, as if we are those guys?
You're right. I didn't really leave you with a prompt. So how about this as a prompt? Is NVC capable of communicating moral judgments? How about that?
Okay. Do you want to take that, Darrell, since I just spoke, or what?
Sure. We seem to get good at this trading back and forth. I want to say, speaking of NVC as doing things on its own is like speaking of, do guns kill people or things of that nature? It's a tool. The tool is used by the individual, and the individual can use it in all kinds of ways. It sounded like from your description, Patrick, that they were using NVC and being slightly unresponsive to you, not just getting to the point, not being concise. They're beating around the bush, basically. There are many people who train in NVC and they think that you're not supposed to have any judgments of anyone or yourself, which I do not subscribe to. I think judgments are just wonderful, but they're kind of a private matter that I would keep private, like bowel movements. It's a medical matter between me and my doctor. You don't need to know about that. And it's the same thing with judgments. Maybe the person wants to know about my judgments of them or myself, but maybe it's inappropriate. So that's tracking. And then there's the passive aggressive thing. I think I might have strayed away, but basically, like, one of the problems is, just like with voluntarism, does voluntarism do this? Does voluntarism do that? You see what the problem is? No, people use the philosophy of the non-aggression principle applied however they choose to, and then they make actions or inactions. It's on them. When I said is NVC capable of communicating judgments, what I meant, that was a short form for, is an NVC practitioner NVC practicing the methods perfectly capable of communicating judgments? Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm using it right now. I'm judging that way of speaking, of thinking of NVC as a tool, fully judging it as likely to lead to concerns and possibly small to large tragedies by thinking of NVC as a tool. And I'm putting stress on that. Now, to say, yeah, can I use NVC and fully express judgments? Of course I can. And there's going to be a cost, because does that person want to hear about my judgments? You know, so I'm keeping that in mind. That's part of critical thinking. Mm-hmm. When you have a method of critical thinking, I mean, if you just call yourself a critical thinker and you don't have a methodology, it's the same thing. Like if you say you've learned NVC because someone used it on you, Patrick. Mm-hmm. You know, they used a version of it. When you do this, I feel this because my need for this was not being met. Would you be willing? That's the request part, to do this so that my need for this can be met. Sing-songy, long, kind of beating around the bush, and also can be conflated as needy. There's a lot of problems with the way that one was taught. And it's fine if maybe it was a meetup, so it was a lot of them, and it's fine, and it's certainly expected and probably the case that they weren't all experts, you know. Maybe they were learning themselves. That's what the meetup group was for, and that's fine. And that's why I also clarified that I am not sitting here saying that I am ultra knowledgeable on this topic. I would probably call myself a journeyman on NVC. That's why I'm saying I'm here to learn from you guys, and I appreciate your time in that regard.
Before we move on, I would like to give a slightly different flavor on that. That it doesn't contradict what Darrell's saying. It's more like coming at it from a different direction. Please. And it might clarify more. So yeah, there's that formula that Darrell just brought up. And in my groups, we practice the formula, and we also practice what I call street NVC. So the purpose of practicing the formula, if it's not obvious, it's kind of like if you're practicing piano or any other Tai Chi or Kung Fu or something where you need to put something into a formula and repeatedly practice it so that you get the principles into, integrated. So then once these principles are integrated, we can practice being more streetwise with it and sound more natural. And then coming back to moral judgment, yes, there is, especially in the beginning, the first gosh, 8 years plus, maybe even 10 of me doing this, I saw it as kind of like a pendulum way over on the other side. Like I was purging moral judgment from my system to a huge degree so that I could do this empathy thing where I'm letting go of self. And now I'm coming back more toward what's realistic, what works in a crucial conversation. I'm shortcutting. I'm making it more natural, where instead of saying something to you like, wow, this thing, this opinion, this political opinion you have, I have this feeling about it, blah, 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 blah. I'd be like, man, that kind of sucks. Or, it's like I'm learning how to integrate. And so it does sound more, and it sounds to me like the people you were conversing with hadn't really got to that level yet. And another thing about the judgment thing is in NVC, we do advocate judgment. It's just value judgment. So we shift moral judgment into value judgment, which to me, value judgment is much more practical. And I'll give you an example of what I mean, if you like.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So let's say somebody's like, hey, what'd you think of that movie? We'd be like, so here's the moral judgment version. It sucked. I hated it because it sucked. I hated it because it was lame. It had bad acting, blah, blah, blah. There's the moral judgment / evaluation version. Versus I hated it because it didn't really, it didn't stimulate my, okay, I'm getting too clinical. You know what? I really dig mental stimulation. I didn't get it out of that movie. I didn't get surprises. It didn't stimulate me to think. I was bored by it, or it didn't have enough boobs in it, whatever. So there I'm taking responsibility. I'm like, here is how it affected me versus this kind of blanket, it sucked, which is like, I call that an assumption of universal truth. Like, no, I don't know everything. So every time you pronounce a moral judgment, if you really look deeply at it, it's making this assumption that, sure, people know you're giving your opinion on one level, but my belief there, it's not proven, is that we're taking in everything, and that oftentimes there's the literal interpretation, if not always, that's coming in too. And I think we're influencing people on that level, subconsciously at least, to hear us saying, I know everything, and here's the way things are. And it doesn't jibe, in terms of like pure honesty, pure authenticity, it doesn't jibe with what reality is. And I'll pause there because I just said a lot.
There was a lot there, and you're starting to touch on, I think, some of the stuff that makes my subconscious red flags pop with NVC. And I would like to kick it over to Darrell and then come back to this. Darrell, can you speak to, can you give it, I don't want to leave my audience completely behind, because I think the vast majority of the people watching this will not know what we're talking about yet. Can you give an example, like he just gave an example of coming out of a movie? Can you give a different kind of example, maybe of NVC in action and how it would change an interaction with people, especially in a conflict type situation?
In a conflict situation, it can go like this, the way I teach it personally, which is a bit different than what Scott was referring to, which is kind of like the early drilling stages of learning the components. I teach it like I am quickly aware of my observations. Those are all the tangibles, the five senses, and just relevant things. And that includes relevant thoughts. These are tangible. If I can write them down, if it's a relevant thing. So I'm taking in, uh-oh, this guy's really angry at me, and then I go over to my feelings. I'm aware I got the fear, I got the frustration because I just want to move along, but now I've got this conflict. This guy is really angry because they wanted their services of getting their content put up on all these 5 places that they paid for, and as a customer of Content Safe, they were not happy with that. So they're angry, and I'm afraid I'm feeling frustrated because the tech guys were behind this. I value everything working smooth, like easy going, ease and efficiency. And now what am I going to do? That's on the request side if you're a novice, but when you're really proficient, that means actions and strategies. What am I going to do to get back into harmony? And I'm going to say, I'm going to calm myself down. That's in my own head. And now I'm going to pay attention to this client that I want to keep as a client. And I'm going to communicate to them words that they would be most likely to wish to hear to sort of like that they understand that I'm understanding where they're coming from. They're frustrated. They paid for something and they didn't get it. So I'm going back over to them. I'm flipping it over to say, okay, what could they be thinking? And I just get a few of those. What could they be feeling? They're angry. It's obvious. What are they wanting? They also want ease and efficiency. And they also want convenience. So I'm going to communicate some of that back. Is like, is that what you wanted? You wanted, like, I realized that this didn't work for you. You wanted the ease and efficiency of uploading once, and now your content is going to 5 different places. And that's what you were expected. That's what you paid for. You paid $30 for that. I totally get it. And I'm going to be right on the connection to the head of all the tech right now to take care of that. What else can I do for you? So I'm just like taking care of a conflict right there in myself first. I'm aware of all those components, and then I'm aware of them to some degree, obviously, but I'm not in them. And what Scott was illustrating for you is he was illustrating using I language. I speak, that's like sign language for I. I speak for myself is a way of being authentic and honest and open about your experience and knowing what it is that motivates you. In NVC, they call them needs. In my training, I call them values or abstract qualities that generate motives of action, you know, but values basically. And when you know what the values are, you know the list like me and Scott, we know that list backwards and forwards. We are able to identify our own motives. We're able to identify their motives, the other people. Mm-hmm. And in identifying motives, these abstract qualities that generate action on people's behalf, that is powerful in a conflict, because then immediately you take care of yourself, hopefully without having to ask a request of someone who's angry at you. And then you see what they can use. What is it that they're looking for? If they get what they want, there's no conflict. It's that simple. It's kung fu of the mind and the heart, like that. You got me?
Yeah. Let me try one more thing, and then I'll go back to Scott. But I want to try a role play scenario with Darrell. I don't know how this is going to go. Let's say that I'm waiting in line for the bank. I'm in a huge hurry. I've got to get money, and I can't waste a single minute. And somebody cuts in front of me. And Darrell, can you play the person waiting in line that gets cut in front of, and maybe I'll play the asshole that just cut in front of you? Can you show me how NVC would both, because your goal is to get this guy out of your way, right? And his goal is obviously to not let that happen, because, you know, he just cut in front of you and he's an asshole. So like, how would you? I
don't even know that I'm going to use NVC for that.
Oh, that's a valid
like in
answer.
That kind of way. You know, like literally, I'm going to size up the situation. How much in a hurry am I really? How much in a hurry is this guy apparently? I usually, you know, and it's not about, I'm trying to, you know, like that's like the very simple thing. I'm trying to use it internally, though. I'd be like saying, where am I at? Am I angry? Because before I'm opening my mouth, I'm going to just identify I'm angry. Yeah. And am I scared? I'm scared because the guy looks unhinged, you know, like that. Look at this guy. I mean, look at his hair. He's just, just stepped in front of me, you know?
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anyone with a goatee instantly. So I've got all these thoughts. I've got a story going on in my head, and I got some feelings going on.
All right.
And so I'm going like, okay, wait. I wanted the convenience. I'm not in a hurry. Or wait, like according to your thing, I am in a hurry. Now I'm sizing up the situation. Is it going to cause a conflict like that? I don't want to start to mention this because this guy is big. Like I'm tiny compared to Patrick, you know? And do I really want to do that? Like, okay, it's important. I need to get this money to my rent right now. And why did you? Okay. So excuse me. And then then I make the choice. But before I even said, excuse me, I'm just aware of everything that I wanted, of everything I'm feeling, everything I'm thinking. I've put them into little buckets, and then I've chosen my strategy. That's me using NVC silently for the situation.
I see. So it's not just the actual communication method. It sounds
You're
like
missing the internal communication.
It sounds like a flavor
There's
of
a whole
stoicism
other
to a certain
going
extent,
on,
right? Like, are you familiar with stoicism? Like thinking about?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That would be like that, like negative visualization, a component of stoicism, where you'd actually visualize what could happen if this happens. How am I going to feel about that? I'm going to now really sink my teeth into that feeling. Okay. And then what would I think? What would I do as an action? What motivates me? That's no knowledge of self. So it's really not missing communication. It's really that many people, you, the listener out there, might be realizing that there's a whole other level of communication that goes inside your own head and inside everyone else's head. Interpersonal communication is a separate thing. So thinking of NVC as purely interpersonal communication is a huge flaw. Got me?
Right. Yes. Okay. Okay. So let me kick back over to Scott, because you hinted at something that bothered me. It was like the difference between a subjective truth and an objective universal truth. It seems like, this is a seems like statement, right? You can definitely correct me. It seems like NVC wants you to shy away from discussing the objective truths and stick to your personal truths, your subjective truths. What do you think about that statement? Do you agree, disagree?
Initially, yeah, I agree that the goal for NVC, I kind of hate putting it this way, but I will. Okay, so my initial thought there, the goal for NVC is not to find objective truths. That, somebody wants to talk about math or certain things that we know for sure are objective truths, or maybe some fringe things that I wouldn't use NVC there. To me, NVC is more about connecting, understanding self, understanding others' perspectives. And well, I'll stop there because that seems to summarize my opinion on it.
Darrell, do you have any response to that same kind of prompt about the difference between subjective versus objective or universal truth?
Yeah, that goes into the realm of critical thinking, and that's great. I think that NVC also goes into the realm of critical thinking because how about this? One can use these methods, a methodological way of thinking and a methodological way of understanding one's own feelings and responding to them, and other people's feelings and the choices of response that are available. All of that is just basically saying you have a chance to use the tools however you want to. So there are many trainers of NVC and users of NVC who have been steered away from getting clarity on objective and subjective reality. Basically, they didn't train their critical thinking minds. They didn't, it would be like the folks who train really, really hard Kung Fu, but nothing soft. Everything is like destructive to some degree of their own body eventually, because they're not building up their own body in their training. And it would be the same thing if you build up your mind without building up your skills with your own emotional response, then you could also be leaving things behind that way as well. You're missing things. You're putting things off the table. So there are many users who do that. You got me?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
That did remind me of a part of NVC that I do practice, that we all do. I think that anybody who, well, I don't know. I don't want to speak for everybody. I'm sure Darrell does. There is the component of the formula that is called observation without evaluation. And I think that's very important. And it does address objective truth to a huge degree now that I'm thinking about it. So the NVC formula, one more time, and I'll do it more. I don't think we did it very slowly or clearly. It's observation, followed by feeling, followed by need, followed by positive doable request. So the observation part I want to talk about for a second because it's super important. It's where we're checking in with somebody to determine, and we'll often refer to it, and like as a teacher or whatever, I'll often refer to it as, how would a camera view what happened? So we want to get as objective as possible. So that person is sharing a story with us. They're caught in this fire and these things happen. So then if I'm reflecting back to them at first to find out, like, to really get a grip on what happened. So it's like, okay, there you were in that fire and the flames were raging all around you and there was no escape and it was really hot. And did it, so I'm putting that out there and asking them and before I even go, optimally, before I go any further and guessing the feelings and the needs and all that, I'm slowing it down and I'm asking for some objective agreement. And I'll switch now to another example to give more clarity. It's like, so I saw 20 dishes in the sink when I came home. And and I'll pause there, or I might say, I felt disgusted because I really value cleanliness or something. And there again, I'm looking for them to correct me and us to come to some kind of agreement on the objective, on what really happened. So there's a lot of value there, including the value of separating out what happened and then the meanings and feelings and all the other stuff that we attach to what happened. So I'll pause there.
Okay. So this is hard to talk about without like a bunch of hypothetical scenarios. I keep trying to come up with something to illustrate my point. So let's say so you said observing without, what was it? Observing
without evaluation would be one way of putting it.
So let's say, we're observing a guy in a blue costume with a car with, red and blue lights, and he is investigating a report of, property damage or something like that. And I'm trying to put this in a scenario that would involve the non-aggression principle. And so in the course of his normal investigation of, a NAP violation, he sees somebody with the wrong vegetation in their possession. And so he, goes over, arrests them, tosses them in the back of the car, and takes them off to jail. So that's the scenario. We have observed this happening. Now you're interacting with the cop, and you need to communicate to him the objective universal truth based on the non-aggression principle that what he did was immoral. How would you use it? Would you use NVC for that? How would you use NVC for that? I guess how about that?
Yeah, okay. Let's say I used NVC for it, and I probably would use my own street NVC, which would be, number one, I value less words. So as few words as possible as I can get across. Hey, wow. The most succinct would be, I saw what you just did. Going a little further, it could be, I saw you walk over there, do this thing, and do that thing to that person. Okay. So I wouldn't get into more details than I absolutely had to let him know that I saw what happened. And then I might, and then the next stage, which is probably more important to you in terms of like, how am I going to get across to him that I do not agree with that? And that could be simply, I do not agree with what you did because I value freedom and I value respecting people's right to do what they want to their own bodies. I value da 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 da. So as you might be picking up on here, I'm with Darrell on, I don't use the word needs. We use it in my groups to integrate the principles, but more and more nowadays, I tell people, do not use the word needs when you're out there talking to anybody in any kind of crucial conversation.
It seems like you just communicated your feelings and not objective ethical truths.
Yeah. So
yeah. What your opinion is, you don't think that he should be doing that. So what? That's just your opinion, man.
Sure. Oh yeah. So what you're saying, it's like, I'm not conveying to him that there is a universal rule about violating people's property body rights, right?
Like I would say, asshole, what you just did was objectively immoral. Get a real job.
Okay. So let's put ourselves in his shoes for a second. Like Darrell was saying, we want to communicate to somebody in a way that they're actually going to open their mind and listen.
I know. What do you think? I know. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. You get where I'm going with that.
Yeah. Darrell, can you speak to what we're talking about here?
Oh, I'm just agreeing and watching Scott take it really well. So, all right. I think that it's going along. He's getting the idea. I mean, I would have my own approach to it, but like anything, it always comes down to the objective. And you're kind of like throwing out these objectives. Like the job is to go ahead and let him know that this is immoral. It's like, when did I take on that objective? But okay, fine. That's a tough one. And I would come up with an elaborate plan to get in with him first, to use the skills that we've just covered, to know myself, to get really nice and calm, to know them, to meet them where they are. This is your job. Your job is to do this, or rather, this is an opportunity of your job. But at the same time, the opportunity is for you to not follow this part of your job. And I want to tell you that the reason I'm sharing this is because I want to have you understand that I'm concerned, because I study history And I've seen where this went with prohibition of alcohol. It produced lots and lots of crime. And as far as I can tell, that's what's been happening for the many decades since the prohibition of the plant that you just confiscated there. So basically, in knowing all of that, I'm concerned with where this is going to go, meaning I'm afraid, not just for myself, but that even includes for people like you, because you have no idea where this is going to lead to for yourself. And I'm actually concerned for you. And now I'm communicating to you. So now I want to say one level beyond that. I also think that the whole process is immoral. To touch anyone else's property is just plain old immoral, especially when they're not hurting anyone. Now, you see, I had to layer it there. I had to get all the way through that to actually try to connect with him as a person, to actually say, I'm concerned for myself and him. Then I can level the message.
And I'm sorry to belittle the details, but I'm going to push back on that because you said, I think it's immoral. That keeps it in the realm of your personal opinion. That keeps it in the realm of the subjective, rather than saying it is immoral. And I belabor this point because it is the linchpin in my position that it cannot be the language of voluntarism if it is incapable of stating the objective truth in that situation, that it is immoral in all situations, times, and places.
Just to say, this is not just like, again, that was not my objective. So I'm not like thinking like that normally, but okay, fine.
Sure.
If that was my objective, just to say it isn't moral to do that, I would just simply say it's not moral to do that, you know? The skill set of NVC, which I apply internally first and externally second, in no way stops one from delivering any message that you keep clear in your head. It's just like a gun is in no way dangerous when you have it under control. It's just a tool, man.
And that's a perfectly valid answer. My question to the experts, the whole point today was, is it true that you cannot communicate that final universal objective judgment using NVC? And if you say you can, then I admit defeat, and I thank you for educating me.
Well, I want to back up a little bit. Number one, I want to congratulate Darrell a little bit, or give him some kudos here, because the way I answered your question, your scenario with the cop, was kind of head on, kind of like, okay, I'll take your premise and I'll just go with it. And I like how Darrell kind of went underneath that in a way. It was like, well, let's talk about whether I would even want to address it that way. And how about first establishing some connection, because how useful is it going to be for me to just go head on and tell him he's wrong or whatever, right? So I want to give some kudos to that, because that is deeper NVC. That's what we aim for. And there's even deeper level I want to bring up in a second. But first, then I want to go back to Patrick and ask you, what is your goal in that situation? Like if your answer was to say to the cop, dude, that's wrong. That is universally wrong, immoral. You shouldn't be doing it. Okay. What was your goal in saying that?
So if it depends on the specific situation, it's either going to be a, look, I've got a 2-second window to send a message to this guy's brain. So it's got to be like one sentence and really quick. It wouldn't have been as aggressive as I gave it to you earlier. It would have been something like, what you just did was immoral. You really should think about the job that you have and, walk away. Is that statement possible with NVC? Just saying that I think that's immoral is part of NVC. I agree. But is it possible to state the same thing as an objective truth? Okay.
So I think you've answered my question.
Okay.
You want to influence him. I mean, that's my,
yes.
That's
sorry,
my goal.
I didn't answer your question, did I? Yes. Yeah. I want to influence him. I want to make him stop doing that job. Yeah.
And I think that's what we all share, that we all want to influence him. And it sounds like you're prioritizing efficiency. And because you're like, yeah, I don't have much time. I want to get a clear, quick, simple message across. And, to me, I'm looking at it like a spreadsheet. Like over here, you got your pros, over here, you got your cons. And I don't see one way in that situation being necessarily better. And there's a lot of factors, right? But I see the pros and cons of the way you're doing. There's a pro of it, like I said, being efficient, getting a quick message across. Cops have limited intelligence on average, supposedly. And
forgive me for interrupting. I think we're mired in a detail that isn't important. Like, it could be a short 2-second one-liner opportunity. It could be a long, hey, I got a chance to sit down with this guy for 2 hours over coffee. But at the end of that conversation, I want to communicate that moral absolute. No matter what the situation is, I'm asking how or if it's possible to communicate that moral absolute.
So I would challenge, I mean, I'll get to that. I don't want to dodge that, but I just want to say that, no, that's not your base motive. That I would say your base motive is to influence him to be more cognizant of the problems he's causing, blah, 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 blah. So freedom, you know, the base thing is more like you want to spread freedom, I would guess. I mean, I don't want to tell you what you feel or anything, but I'm just kind of investigating here.
How can I spread freedom if I can't communicate the truth?
Well, so to me, that's what we call a strategy, is like we can use, and that's what we're talking about here, is we're comparing strategies for getting to changing a person's mindset, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So then I would just say that on the pros and cons side of using an NVC approach, we are maybe being less efficient. And on the pro side, we are taking away the adversarial aspect to some degree. Mm-hmm. So we're lessening the adversarial aspect and lessening the efficiency. Maybe it's a wash. You know, it depends on each situation.
I don't feel like my question was answered. So let me restate it just to make sure. Okay. So is it possible to communicate the objective truth that caging someone over vegetation is immoral with NVC?
So that, yeah. And I know, I'm sorry, this is going to sound like dodging. I'm going to give you 2 answers to that. For somebody who's been doing it for 14 years, fuck yeah, I make judgments all the time out loud. Okay. In the interest of efficiency, I'll say, that is wrong, motherfucker. You should have asked that person's permission before you did that. I said that to a friend the other day who pushed a hug on somebody. But
are you practicing NVC while doing that?
Not really. No, not technically practicing the NVC that's in the book, that book. That's why I'm writing a new book called Practical Empathy.
2.0. Acceptable.
Yeah. So yeah, in my groups, it's kind of like you're practicing piano. You don't practice disharmony necessarily, at least in the beginning, you know? So that's all it is. It's like, look, in the beginning, and we're going to practice it how it is in the book so we can get those basics down, so we can sort of cleanse our system of the poisons of how easy it is for just to walk around doing these moral judgments left and right, like, oh, that person's fat, that person's stupid, da da da. Once we cleanse ourselves of that, we can get back to sort of an equilibrium where, yeah, it's okay to get efficient sometimes and just say it how it is.
Understood. Darrell, so it sounds to me like what Scott just said was that using the NVC tools wouldn't allow me to communicate that, but it's okay once, you know, we're in the right place and understand the expectations of what that's going to do in the world, that, you know, it's okay to not always use NVC and to communicate the objective truth. What do you think?
It sounds pretty close to what I would say. I would say that the tools are right there. I might just choose to only use it internally just to master myself. If my objective is to, again, like if I wanted to share the objective truth, knowing that doing so quickly, efficiently, is going to not make a bridge to that person, is going to, of course, not spread the message of liberty, and might even cause further conflict between myself and them. I'd say, where's the critical thinking in that? You know, like,
share it slowly over a 2-hour period. Do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you get to choose how you use it and when you use it. It's like a tool. Like, when's the right time? It's like as if we're talking about when's the right time to use a weed whacker or when's the right time to use a chainsaw. The tool is there to do what the tool does. The tool gets mastery over oneself internally, and there's really never a time to not use it that way. The tool can be used then to apply to make a bridge of connection to another person, to leverage whatever situation is desirable. This is what I choose to do. So I keep in mind what my objectives are. I make sure I know what actions are likely to achieve my objectives based upon previous situations. And then I realize what resources, including the time and attention span, are necessary to achieve those objectives with those actions. It's like that, man. It's really just a tool. So it's not like there's some NVC God saying you're not allowed to do it this way and we're all supposed to do it that way. Then it gets to be a catechism and a type of religion. And I'm very concerned with people who use it that way.
Okay, absolutely fair enough. I am on board with everything you said. So in closing, let me restate the reason I called for people to talk to you about this and see if you guys agree with me now or if I'm still wrong. That NVC cannot be a language or the language or a language of voluntarism, meaning it cannot be a language that voluntarists should use. Because it is incapable of communicating objective truths, and voluntarism is nothing but a recognition of universal objective truths about the ethics of the non-aggression principle. So if you're unable to communicate the objective truth of the core principle of voluntarism, how can you say that the language is the language of that thing if you can't communicate it?
I don't think there is a language of voluntarism. I don't think there is a language of the non-aggression principle. Those are just principles that you can look up and you can summarize as don't hit people, don't take their stuff. What are you going to do about it is your personal choice. Just like, since you know of Stoicism, is Stoicism the language of voluntarists or the philosophy of voluntarists? Well, it is for a bunch of them. This is a tool set. When is the tool set that you want to personally be out of control as far as not personally aware of what your thoughts are, your actual emotions, the values that generate those thoughts and emotions, and what you strategically choose to do with that, including making requests if you happen to like doing that kind of thing? That's all only half of NVC, by the way. There's also the 4 Ds of disconnected communication, which we didn't even touch into. I think thinking in absolutes is a big problem. Same thing with the Sith Lords out there. You know, there is no the language. These are just tools, man. I think thinking in terms of looking for one holy grail language of voluntarism, I would say more like with Scott, this is a language that will help voluntarists, because how the hell are you going to spread this message if you don't have mastery over yourself, and then if you don't have skill sets to build bridges to other people? Case closed.
I agree with everything you just said. Scott, did you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know what our time is like. And maybe it could be another day or something, but there's 2 things that I would want to share at some point, and I would do it succinctly, but I do understand if we're running out of time.
Take the time you need. Yeah. Okay.
There's 2 items. One is how NVC has turned me into sort of a lie detector. And the other is using NVC for anger management. Okay. So the lie detector thing, and this is mostly hypothetical. It's worked for me. Contending that as we communicate, we are taking in all kinds of information subconsciously. That I'm talking about is like body language, for example. And typically in our conversations, we're combining, or it gets combined in our brains with the words we're, the answers we're hearing to our questions, the things people are telling us. So if we're training ourselves over the years to take in deeper information, call it motives. We call it empathy, but it's really motives. It's cognitive empathy more than anything else that we practice. And it's like, why did you do that? Was it because you're meeting this value or that value? So the point is, when you're combining a deeper amount of information with that body language, then you get far more sensitized to when somebody is not being authentic, when their words and their body language are not matching up with their actions. And I don't know if you can extrapolate from there to see how. And then also it's like that expands to not just that one person that you're getting to know on a much deeper level than you normally would, but all of humanity. So it's like, I am bombarded with lies. This is not the most pleasant thing to see through people so often, but it's useful. It's useful in negotiation. It's useful in a lot of ways. And I'm getting better at being able to call people out. There's another whole thing with NVC is you practice getting courageous with calling people out on their shit. So then that's the lie detector thing in a nutshell. And if you have any questions about that or not, then I'll move to the next, that other thing I brought up.
That's interesting.
Anger.
It sounds like a whole new conversation that could happen around that, though. Why don't you proceed to your second thing?
Okay, so an example I give people in my groups, and I've created numerous visuals, like 3 different visuals to try to help people see how it can work for them. Let's say you are driving down the road, you get cut off by somebody, and so this is all internal, really, like Darrell's talking about. It's like, fuck, I'm pissed. I am so pissed because that person just cut me off. Okay. Well, the feeling's obvious. I'm pissed off. I'm angry. I'm scared, maybe. What's the underlying need or value that's being challenged here? Well, I value consideration and respect and safety. Okay. So identifying those things in yourself and just sort of thinking about that for a moment, and of course, taking a breath or whatever, that helps us lighten up to the point where then maybe we can more easily move to the second stage, which is like, okay, now I'm going to make up a story. I'm going to put myself in their shoes. Was that person like speeding to the hospital with a pregnant wife in the back seat? Were they late for their work? And if they're late one more time, they're going to get fired. So we put ourselves through that little exercise, and that's empathy. That's motives. That's not, I won't sidetrack. So there we lighten up in terms of, okay, that person wasn't out to get me. Okay. And then what my theory there is that you do that often enough and you're training your brain to, eventually your brain realizes, you know what, I'm always ending up in this place of peace. I'm always ending up in this place of like, who gives a shit? It's something that happened. I can't change it. Carrying around anger doesn't do me any good, blah, blah. And then eventually what happens is you become so chill in situations, and it doesn't reduce your reflexes. If somebody fucks with you and you need to punch them in the face, you need to dodge them, whatever, you're still going to do it. Okay. This isn't going to mess up your survival instincts. It's just going to make you so much more chill. It's like, some people call it Aikido for words or Aikido for emotions. So that's pretty much the summary of how that works.
All right. Darrell, any final thoughts?
I think Scott summed it up pretty well. It's really been great to be on your show, and looking forward to consuming more of your content out there.
Well, thank you. And guys, I am the honored one here. Thank you to experts in your field for giving me the time to sit here and be ignorant and throw things at you and have you deal with my elementary level understanding of the topic. My closing would just be, guys, this is an important and very useful tool for you to learn, to help you in your life, to help you in all the conflicts that arise in your life, to help you with your own internal zen. It is valuable. It is useful. And if you want to learn more about it, check out these guys' websites in the description and reach out to them. I'm sure they can point you to the resources that you need, or even give you the coaching and teaching that you'd need to learn more about it.